Discover the incredible moment a cop slaps a black man, unknowingly the chief judge of the court. The sun beat down on Marcus Wright as he stood with his daughter, Zoe, at the community event in their struggling neighborhood. Laughter filled the air, kids darted around with colorful balloons, but attention hung just beneath the surface, thick as the summer heat. Here, dreams were bridled by economic pressures. For Marcus, a dedicated father and small business owner, the dream of building a community center loomed heavily, sparked by a desire to ignite hope and unity in a place often shadowed by misunderstanding. That Saturday was meant to be a celebration, an uplift amidst daily struggles. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the tightness in his chest. He looked at Zoe, her smile radiant, and felt a surge of love mixed with the weight of his responsibilities. But then, in an instant, everything changed. The rookie cop, a newcomer barely scraping the surface of understanding this community, misjudged a friendly exchange between Marcus and a fellow resident. Without warning, the officer's hand flew through the air, connecting sharply with Marcus's face. The crowd went silent, gasps echoing against crumbling storefronts that pulsed with stories of better days. Crumpled chalk hung in the air, a slap delivered to a man who would soon be revealed as a pivotal figure in the fight against injustice. The silent spectators were unaware that Marcus was the secretly appointed chief judge of the court. This was no ordinary moment. This was a lightning bolt igniting the fuse of change. In the aftermath, Marcus held his ground, fighting the urge to retaliate. The sting of humiliation welled within him, but instead of despair, he chose another path. With a heavy heart, he began organizing community gatherings, inviting neighbors to share their experiences. Together, we can navigate the chaos, Marcus proclaimed, his voice rising with fiery conviction. Little by little, the community answered his call. They came together, hearts open, sharing tears of pain and laughter of hope, forging bonds that began to bridge the divides between them. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach seriously. It makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Weeks went by, but the sting of the slap lingered like a shadow on Marcus's soul. As he prepared for his role at the courthouse, doubt crept in: could he truly be a hammer of justice? Or was he merely a broken man haunted by public humiliation? As the heaviness of the world bore down on him, he came face to face with the rookie officer who slapped him. Their moment could redefine their fates. It was heavy with the weight of forgiveness, yet charged with the challenge of understanding. In that charged silence hung a question that rattled through the hearts of onlookers. What would the true cost of justice be? Marcus stood on the precipice of transformation, knowing that one conversation could ignite a fire of change that would sweep through the heart of the community, propelling him toward redemption and hope. As Marcus faced the rookie officer, a surge of conflicting emotions coursed through him. The crowd around them seemed to hold its breath, anticipation crackling like static in the air. Marcus could see the nervousness in the cop's eyes, a reflection of his own uncertainty. This moment could either cement animosities or lay the groundwork for something profound. Why? Marcus finally asked, his voice steady but low, a mix of hurt and confusion. Why did you do it? The officer shifted on his feet, glancing down, avoiding eye contact. I thought you were doing something wrong, he stammered, the frustration evident in his tone. The words felt hollow to Marcus, a feeble excuse in the face of his dignity. Around them, whispers spread through the crowd. Some were in solidarity with Marcus, as they too had faced senseless aggression. Others murmured in support of the officer, perhaps defending a system that often felt like it needed to serve and protect with an iron fist. Yet, in the midst of those clashing views, Marcus realized that this was exactly what he stood against. He took a deep breath, drawing courage from the faces around him, especially from Zoe, who clutched her balloon tightly, oblivious to the tension. You can't just judge someone without knowing their story, Marcus pressed. We're more than what you see on the surface. This slap, it's just a symptom of something deeper. The officer opened his mouth to retort, but Marcus wouldn't let him. This community has stories. Pain and joy, anger and pride, all intertwined. If you want to protect us, you need to understand, not just react. Silence fell heavy between them as the officer grappled with those words. For a fleeting moment, it appeared that he might soften. Anguished eyes darted between Marcus and the crowd, caught in their judgment and the flicker of empathy blooming within. Zoe stretched her hand out toward the officer, her innocent touch a bridge over the chasm of discord. Can we all just be friends? She asked innocently, her eyes wide, hopeful. The crowd murmured, a wave of emotions cascading through those present, tension eased by the sweetness of innocence. But as Marcus looked at the officer, he saw something flicker, a light of understanding. Yet he also sensed the weight of the officer's training, the pressures from above, and the ingrained biases that shaped his reaction. What if their histories collided here at this moment? Let's begin talking, Marcus offered, not just for himself, but as an invitation, an olive branch extended amidst the rubble. This should be a chance for understanding, not division. As the officer clenched his fists tightly, conflict and hesitation played across his face. He opened his mouth, only to falter once again, unsure how to proceed. With his anxiety rising, Marcus realized this was bigger than any of them could truly fathom. This was about justice, community, and ultimately, healing. It was about moving beyond the slap and confronting the biases that perpetuated fear within both sides. Zoe's curious gaze shifted from her father to the officer and then to the crowd. The moment was pregnant with possibility, the winds of change whispering through the murmurs. But just then, a familiar face appeared from the crowd, an elder known for unity, a woman who had weathered storms of her own. The crowd split like a wave, revealing her presence, her expression resolute. With calm authority, she stepped forward and spoke. We cannot dwell on the past, nor can we ignore it. We must fight for both justice and compassion. And Marcus felt a spark of hope igniting anew. Yet, as all eyes turned toward the woman, the officer remained silent, caught in a battle of his own. What would he choose? Would he seek to understand, or would he retreat, reinforcing the barriers they had tried so hard to break? The moment hung in the air, thick with tension and anticipation. Marcus could feel everyone waiting, hearts racing as the weight of the elder's words hung between them. They needed action. Words alone couldn't bridge this divide. The officer swallowed hard, his posture stiffening. He glanced around, scanning the faces in the crowd, then focused back on Marcus, who was searching for any sign of understanding in his eyes. The silence stretched, thick with discomfort, as if the very air was holding its breath. Look, the officer finally said, voice trembling, didn't he know? I thought you were. I was just. He faltered again, his frustration surfacing in a harsh exhale. The crowd buzzed with murmurs, some urging him to continue, others expressing disbelief. Marcus glanced at Zoe, her innocent face a contrast to the harsh reality around them. Her wide eyes were a stark reminder of everything they were fighting for. It's okay, he said to her, reassuringly squeezing her shoulder, even as a storm brewed inside him. This is a moment. We can make it count. Just listen. Another voice emerged from the crowd, older and more profound, a man who had seen too many struggles. We're tired of being judged without context. Each of us carries a story. The officer's eyes softened briefly, and Marcus seized the moment. You don't have to carry your badge like a shield, he urged. You could be a part of us. There is strength in listening and strength in understanding. In that instant, the tension began to shift. Hesitantly, the officer stepped forward. I don't want to fight. I really don't, he confessed, the tremor in his voice now tinged with a plea for connection. I want to be better, but it's hard. I'm scared of what I could do if I'm wrong. A ripple flowed through the crowd, a collective understanding blooming. We all are, Marcus replied, his heart thumping wildly in his chest. But that fear shouldn't define us. Together, we can learn. The officer nodded slowly, his fists slowly relaxing. Okay, he whispered, almost himself. Teach me. The crowd drew closer, as if instinctively wanting to witness this pivotal exchange. They leaned in, hope mixing with trepidation, creating a charged atmosphere. Let us share, the elder woman suggested, her voice steady and warm. Each of our stories can help shine a light on the darkness. Maybe then we can see each other clearly. Marcus took a breath, feeling a sense of unity forming, like the first tendrils of dawn breaking over the horizon. Zoe's small hand slipped into his, steadying him. He couldn't ignore the magic of this moment, the potential for healing. Around him, faces began to nod in agreement, and stories started to unfold one by one, like petals blooming in the spring. An elder spoke of his youth, the struggles he faced, and the days spent fighting for rights. A woman shared her story of loss, how a community pulled together against injustice. And as the tales flowed, they wrapped around the officer, drawing him in gently, weaving a web of empathy. Yet, amidst this glimmer of hope, a familiar tension remained. Would the officer truly open his heart? Would he let the walls down? Or would the scars of training and expectation restrain him? As the sun dipped lower, casting shadows across their gathering, Marcus felt the air shift once more, this time into something tangible change, like a whisper beckoning them forward. But would the officer be brave enough to take the first step? The eyes of the crowd, the stories shared, and the silent pleas wrapped around him like a cloak. What if Zoe said softly, breaking the rising tension? What if we could just promise to be different? In that moment, as heads turned to the officer, the question lingered heavily in the air, and all eyes awaited his answer. Would he dare promise? Would he step forward and stand in solidarity? The officer shifted nervously, uncertainty playing across his face as all eyes bore down on him. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment, a single heartbeat reverberating through the crowd. The anticipation was palpable, creeping into every corner of the gathering. Promise to be different. The officer's brow furrowed as he pondered the words. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, the battle inside him raging. 1,000 thoughts jostled for attention, training, duty, fear, and the desperation to connect. I can try, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. His words hung in the air, and though they offered a flicker of hope, doubt lingered like an uninvited guest. Marcus felt a spark ignite inside him. They had cracked the surface, but there was so much left to unearth. Trying as a start, Marcus replied, feeling Zoe squeeze his hand tighter. He glanced at her glowing face, a silent encouragement. We all need that chance to try. It's like learning to walk again after a fall. It's okay to stumble. The crowd nodded, a symphony of agreement rising and falling like the ocean waves, pushing against the shore. Marcus saw out of the corner of his eye how the officer's shoulders slowly dropped. Maybe he was letting down his guard, even if just a little. Tell us more, a voice chimed in from behind. It was a young woman, her eyes sparkling with eagerness. What do you feel right now? The officer hesitated, glancing from face to face, searching for reassurance. I feel overwhelmed, he admitted slowly, but I also feel like I'm here. With you. For you. His honesty wrapped around the group like a warm embrace. Marcus felt a smile tug at his lips. The officer was talking, really talking. The walls were cracking, bit by bit. Another voice rose up, a man whose hands were calloused from labor. I know what it's like to feel scared to live with shadows around you, he said, recalling a painful memory that silenced the crowd. Every time I see those lights in my rearview mirror, I brace myself. I prepare for a fight. The officer's expression shifted to something softer, more human. I don't want to be those lights, he replied, swallowing hard. That is not who I want to be. In that moment, Marcus could see the tides changing. The crowd leaned in, each person open, vulnerable. Stories poured out like rainfall after a long drought, truths crisscrossing, binding them through tears, laughter, and shared pain. As tales flooded the air, the officer listened. He nodded slowly, absorbing each voice, each story, placing them like markings on his heart. A woman recounted the first time she felt compassion from someone outside her bubble, a moment she had never forgotten. A young man spoke about dreams crushed under the weight of assumptions. Each story was a note in an orchestra, building a melody of hope, but still, lingering like vapor. Marcus sensed a ripple of doubt among the crowd. What if this was all a fleeting moment? What if conversations evaporated without true commitment? Zoe squeezed his hand again, as if she felt that uncertainty too. She leaned closer, eyes bright. Do you think he'll really change, Marcus? The question hung between them, heavy and aching. Would this officer find the strength to turn intention into action? Or would the cracks in his armor seal back up, hiding him from the truth? The group stood poised on the brink of something powerful. As the sun set and darkness began to drape the gathering, they could feel the air thickening, charged with potential. What's next? Marcus finally asked, breaking the stillness. What are we going to do with this moment? With these stories? All eyes turned to the officer. His response could either rewrite the story or leave it unfinished, dangled in the air like a question. Would he seize this chance or remain too afraid to step forward? The officer looked out at the crowd, a mix of hope and despair reflecting in his eyes. It was as if time stood still, the night thickening around them. The weight of their stories pressed on him, raw and real, demanding action. The silence was deafening. I don't want to let you down, he finally said, his voice steadier now, like a newly forged steel. I've heard things tonight that I've never truly listened to before. I want to be better to make things better. His words stood like a flickering light in the dark, fighting against shadows of doubt. A murmur spread through the crowd. It was gentle at first, then blossomed into applause, a rhythmic beat of acceptance. The officer's heart quickened at the sound, each clap swelling against the walls of fear he had built around himself. Yet, despite the applause, Marcus could see the flicker of anxiety still lingering in his gaze. It wouldn't be easy. Words are just that, a voice interrupted, tinged with skepticism. It was an older gentleman, his brow furrowed with skepticism. You can talk all you want, but what will you do? What next steps? The officer looked down, running a hand over his short hair, trying to gather his thoughts. I want to start a community forum. More meetings like this where we can actually talk and listen to each other. Maybe even ride along to see things through your eyes. Marcus felt a spark of excitement at that idea. This could be a turning point. That is a great place to start, he replied, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. Imagine the connections we could make. Real conversations, face to face. The older man's stern expression softened, just a bit. A little talk won't fix years of hurt, he said. But you're right, it's something. We need to see real change, real commitment behind those words. The officer nodded. I promise to put my heart into this. I know it won't happen overnight. I'm willing to work for it. Zoe leaned into Marcus, her excitement radiating. Do you see that? He really trying. She whispered. He could feel her hope, a warmth he wanted to wrap around everyone present. Just then, from the back of the crowd, a woman raised her hand. I want to help, she declared, her voice full of determination. We can organize events, create outreach programs. There are so many of us who want to assist. Yeah, let us do this together, shouted another man, his face lighting up as the energy shifted in the air. Suddenly, a wave of enthusiasm surged through the gathering, each person waving their hands, contributing ideas, offering resources. Marcus's heart soared. This was more than a moment. It was a movement beginning to uncoil. Yet, in the middle of that joyous chaos, Marcus felt a warning whisper through him. Would all the hope built tonight hold fast against the weight of the world outside? As word upon word spilled into the warm night like scattered stars, the officer shielded his face with his hand, overwhelmed by the chorus of support, yet trembling at the prospect of what was needed to come. Let us set a date, he proposed, his voice cutting through the excitement. I want to make things happen, and I can't do it alone. People nodded, some even shouted out dates. For a moment, it felt electric, like every piece was coming together. But deep down, Marcus sensed that words were one thing, and following through was another. What if their conversation became just another faded memory? The evening unfolded under a star-specked sky, filled with laughter and planning. Yet an edge of uncertainty remained. As the crowd began to break, Marcus noticed the officer lingering, his gaze meeting Marcus's. "Are you with me?" he asked, sincerity pouring from his eyes. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. Could trust bloom from the ashes of doubt? Would this really be the start of something lasting? The questions still hung, unspoken yet vivid in the night air, requiring more than just words. What were they willing to sacrifice to make lasting change? As the crowd began to disperse, murmurs and laughter still echoed in the night air. Marcus felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The officer strode toward him, eyes lit with a newfound purpose. It almost made him forget the heaviness lingering in his heart. But then a figure stepped into the officer's path, a tall man with a commanding presence. His face was stern, but there was a glint of curiosity in his eyes that held a promise of deeper understanding. The crowd parted slightly as he approached, and Marcus could feel the shift in energy. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice smooth yet intense. "I couldn't help but overhear your discussion. I appreciate your willingness to organize. But as you might have guessed, trust is hard-earned in our community." The officer straightened, maintaining eye contact. "I understand. I know my words mean little without actions to back them up," he replied, a slight tremor in his voice. "But I'm ready to take that first step. Let us try to bridge this gap together." The man nodded slowly, and Marcus felt the tension crackle between them. It was a subtle dance of acknowledgement, one step forward, a cautious inch back. The air grew thick with expectation, as if the night itself was holding its breath in anticipation. After a moment, the man introduced himself. "I'm David, a member of the city council. I've seen our community suffer. We need real commitment, and we need it now." "Exactly." Marcus jumped in, his heart racing again. "If we can all come together, share our concerns, there's a lot more at stake than just discussions," David interjected, his tone now sharper. "We need your plans to translate into something tangible. People are tired of being promised change that never happens. We endure pain, and it's often dismissed." The officer's expression firmed, resolving into determination. "Then let us ensure the pain is heard. We'll schedule these forums, establish connections. I want to shy away from the uncomfortable either. I want to understand the very experiences that have fueled this anger." David appeared thoughtful, his eyes locking onto the officer's with a simmering intensity. "You need to know how serious this is. Some of the things you might see on these ride-alongs, they could change you." "No, they will change me," the officer replied firmly, standing a little taller, emboldened by the weight of responsibility that now seemed almost a part of him. Marcus watched as a flicker of hope crossed David's face. "All right then, show us you mean it." The crowd had started to drift away again, yet something about this exchange felt monumental. Marcus felt a swell of energy rising again, but it was tempered with a heavy awareness. What if their enthusiasm ran out before they managed to find footing? Just then, a shout echoed down the street. Without warning, chaos erupted. In the distance, someone was yelling. Marcus caught a glimpse of dark shapes moving swiftly, shadows melting through the night. His heart sank as panic rippled through the small crowd. "Stay here," the officer yelled, already moving toward the source of the disturbance, but fear clawed at Marcus's chest. Above the shadows, they could hear sirens wailing, a sound all too familiar, one that could easily drown out their hopes. "Wait!" Marcus shouted after him, acutely aware of the implications. Would this reckless moment overshadow everything they had begun to build? The officer turned, his face determined yet conflicted. "We must help. We can't ignore what is happening." But Marcus hesitated, feeling the weight of the crowd's collective tension as they watched. What if this was the very moment that he would be part of something more dangerous than he anticipated? The officer, heart racing, dashed to the scene, and something within Marcus pulled him toward the motion. Could they find a way to stay united amidst the chaos, make their voices heard without being drowned in the turmoil that surrounded them? As Marcus followed, a rush of adrenaline surged through him. The lines had blurred now. Would they be able to navigate through this unexpected storm? Or would it push them further apart, challenging the fragile trust that had begun to form? What awaited them in the unfolding night wasn't just chaos, it could change everything. The shouts grew louder as Marcus rounded the corner, sweat clinging to his brow and his heart thumping wildly. Sirens sliced through the air, escalating the tension into a palpable dread. People were running now, their faces twisted in fear or desperate urgency. Somewhere in the chaos, he could make out the officer's figure, but now glimmers of blue and red lights painted the scene in disorienting flashes. "Where are you going?" Marco's breath caught as he chased just behind the officer. He felt like a gust of wind against a solid wall, a wave against a rock. The sound of people crying out added to the chaos, and the scent of fear hung thick in the air. "Keep moving." The officer pushed through the throng, but Marcus stumbled, rooted as panic gripped him. Memories of everything he had fought against flooded his mind. Was this chaos a sign? A prelude to something worse? As they reached the heart of the commotion, the sight nearly took Marcus's breath away. A group of armed officers had formed a barrier around a small figure. Marcus squinted, his heart hammering against his ribs. Was it a person on the ground? "Stay back." The officer shouted again, urgency thrumming in his voice while trying to maintain control. Marcus swallowed hard as the officer approached the scene. He recognized one of the figures, David. The council member was arguing with someone he couldn't see beyond the shadows. "David," the officer yelled, frustration pouring from every syllable. "What is happening?" But before David could answer, more voices bellowed from the crowd. The man on the ground struggled. "I didn't do anything," he shouted, panic lacing his words. The voice seemed desperate and familiar. At that moment, time froze for Marcus. He forced his way closer, pushing through the bodies until a clearer view appeared. The man on the ground was black and looked terrified, but Marcus's heart sank as the realization hit him. It was Alex, a guy he had admired from a distance, someone who had always stood up for his rights. "Stop!" Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "Get away from him!" Pushing through the fray, he reached for the officer next to Alex, who jostled unsteadily. The officer's hand came up to stop him, but it was too late. The next moment felt like slow motion. In a seemingly instinctive reaction, the officer swung toward Alex, an act of unnecessary aggression that turned Marcus's stomach. "You need to calm down," the officer barked, not realizing the racial undertone that fueled the moment. "No!" Marcus screamed, horror squeezing his chest, each word fighting to break free of the suffocating air. Panic blanketed the crowd, gasps echoing everywhere. In that instant, as Alex's eyes widened in disbelief, a collective shock rippled through the crowd. Everything that had just begun the fragile connection they were trying to build teetered on the edge. Marcus's gut tightened. How can this be happening? He thought, his breath rapid and shallow. He was there to help cultivate change, yet the fear boiled and bubbled over. What had been an opportunity for growth now lay shattered amid screams and chaos. Would they let a moment of fear define them? In one fleeting heartbeat, it felt like everything they hoped to mend was spiraling into darkness before their very eyes. Would they break apart under this weight, or find resilience in the ruins? The choice was still there, only unclear in the starkness of the night. But as the sirens wailed on, Marcus's heart pounded louder. Would they stand together, or would fear tear them apart forever? The night felt unreal, caught in a loop of uncertainty, and before he could think, his instincts whispered back to him, "You need to do something." And then he took a step forward, determined to challenge the storm of chaos swirling around him. What would he find on the other side? The moment Marcus stepped into the fray, everything changed. The temperature of fear spiked, electrifying the air around them. He could feel the weight of eyes upon him, a mix of curiosity and worry swirling in the crowd. The sight of Alex on the cold pavement haunted him, the look of desperation, the struggle against injustice. "Get off him," Marcus shouted again, feel like the only voice crashing against the walls of authority. He could hardly hear himself over the clamor, yet the words tumbled out anyway, fueled by something primal. Time slowed as the officer hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. In that split second, a window opened, and Marcus seized it. He reached out, grabbing hold of the officer's arm with trembling fingers. "Please, just listen. Didn't he do anything wrong?" The cop jerked back, surprise painting his features. The tension surged again, increasing like a tightrope pulled too far. It was a moment that could explode or calm the storm. Marcus's pulse raced as he dared to look towards Alex, desperate for any glimmer of hope, any acknowledgement that this wasn't the end. "Who are you?" The officer spat, his voice low, eyes narrowing. "Get back." "I'm nobody," Marcus said, his voice more measured now. "Just a guy trying to help." He took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "But he asked somebody. He asked a person, and you're scared of that. Just give him a chance." The anger in the air vibrated like a live wire, and for a moment, it felt like the crowd was collectively holding its breath. People around Marcus shared wary glances, unsure of whether to stand back or push forward. Making a choice, a lanky teenager shouted from the back, "Yeah, just let him go." It ignited something. One voice turned into two, then three, a chorus of frustration and righteous indignation building like tidal waves crashing against a breaking shore. The officer adjusted his stance, but hesitation lingered in his eyes. "Stand down," he barked, but the command wavered. "Alex is fighting for our rights." Someone else yelled, their words ringing loud and clear. "He has done more good for this community than you ever will." That stirred Marcus not just anger, but a kind of hope he hadn't expected. He swallowed hard, feeling the fire spread inside him. He looked directly into Alex's eyes. "You're not alone, man. We're here. We're not backing down." The words clung to the air, and gradually, more heads nodded in agreement. More voices rose in solidarity. The officers appeared divided now, their authority challenged, and that shift felt monumental. The tension was a living thing, shifting and sprawling out as the crowd began to push closer. The officer looked between Marcus and Alex, frustration fighting with uncertainty. But it was there the seed of doubt planted within the system. They could see it. Then, out of the darkness, a sudden, authoritative voice echoed above the tumult. "What the hell is going on here?" A figure pushed forward, and Marcus's heart leaped as he recognized the council member, David, marching through the throng like a guardian. "David!" Marcus shouted, relief flooding him. "You need help." David's gaze swept across the scene, taking in the distressed crowd, the officers, and Alex on the ground. His expression hardened, and he called out firmly, "What's the context? Stand him up now." The atmosphere crackled with potential, fragile yet charged. Questions lingered like ghosts, and Marcus stared, breath quickening. Could this moment be the turning point they had all wished for? Or just another instance of violence because of a misunderstanding? The night still held its breath, the outcome spinning on a knife's edge. Then came a message over David's radio, shrill and alarming, cutting through the tension. "Backup arriving. Officer S down." "Repeat, Officer S down." Marcus's stomach sank. What had just begun now felt like chaos revisiting. He was on the precipice of change, yet uncertainty loomed larger than ever. What new dangers awaited them now? Marcus felt the weight of his decision pressing against his chest. Would they stand their ground against the monsters of fear, or would this rallying moment shatter under the influence of escalating tensions? The chaos erupted. The message on David's radio echoed in the air, a sharp reminder of the stakes. Suddenly, the night felt darker, heavier. Marcus felt the push and pull of adrenaline. It surged in his veins, begging him to act even when his mind screamed for caution. This was a tipping point, and he could sense it. "Stay put," David commanded, trying to regain control as the murmur of the crowd swelled. "Everyone, keep your distance. We'll sort it out." But fear didn't listen. Voices rose and fell like waves crashing against the shore. The crowd had a heartbeat, throbbing with urgency. People began stepping forward, emboldened by the scene unfolding before them. They had witnessed too much silence. Their solidarity felt electric now, a shared resolve growing more potent with each passing second. "Do we really trust the system?" Someone shouted. "Look where that S gotten us." Hushed murmurs followed. Marcus felt that question resonate deep within him. The fear of retaliation was palpable. A flash of doubt made him wonder if they were even fighting the correct battle. This was about Alex, yes, but it was also bigger than one person. It was about everyone who had faced injustice, about rising against the tide that had swept them along for far too long. "Keep it calm," David repeated, his voice rising above the din, struggling to grasp the reins of reason. But it was too late. The tension had already snapped. Suddenly, two more police vehicles pulled up, blue and red lights painting the area in a chaotic glow. The air crackled with anxiety. Would this bring backup or more trouble? "Fight for what, Wright?" shouted a woman in the front, standing firm among the crowd. That one phrase seemed to ignite something in Marcus, an echo of hope amidst the fear. He squeezed Alex's shoulder gently, a nonverbal promise that they were in this together. As police officers emerged from the cars, their expressions were a blend of caution and aggression. They assessed the scene with calculated gazes, hands resting on their belts. The solidarity of the crowd was a stark contrast to their stiff demeanor. The figure of the man on the ground, Alex, felt smaller now amongst all of it, even though Marcus wanted him to know that he wasn't forgotten. "Stand down," barked one officer as they moved to join the fray, but then faltered as he recognized David. "Sir, what's the situation?" Before David could respond, confusion reigned. More voices filled the night, a cacophony of people urging for action, demanding justice. Then, breaking through the disarray, a familiar voice called out, "Stop!" It was Alex's voice, strong and clear, cutting through the noise like a beacon. Those simple words made the world pause. It caught the attention of the officers, and suddenly all eyes were on Alex, still on the ground but refusing to back down. "I want to be silenced. This is our moment." His voice, imbued with power, held everyone captive. Even Marcus felt the weight of those words, realizing that this wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was a stand for every boy, every girl, every person who had ever felt the sting of unfairness. What would happen next? Would the police listen, or would this flood of emotion drown them all in confusion? Ruin loomed in the air, but so did a bittersweet glimmer of courage. The crowd stirred, hope swelling like a tide around them, and Marcus clenched his fists, taking a step closer to the front line. Would they find the strength to turn the tide of chaos into a revolution? The moment felt fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. But just before the impending storm hit, something unexpected happened. An officer, hesitant and unsure, stepped forward, his expression wavering. What could he possibly say that would change everything? Or would the night spiral downward into discord, making their stand futile? Only time would tell. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the officer to speak. The weight of the moment pressed against them, heavy with history and hope. Marcus could see the doubt swimming in the officer's eyes, the clash of duty and humanity battling within him. The officer began, but the words hung in the air, lost amidst the tumult. "Just listen," Marcus urged, stepping closer. He could feel Alex's gaze on him, a mix of fear and trust reflected there. This was not just about a single man. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been marginalized or misunderstood. The officer swallowed hard, adjusting his posture, clearly struggling with the gravity of the situation. "I want to understand," he finally said, his voice shaking slightly. "But you need to help me do that." The crowd reacted with a rush of murmurs, some fearfully doubtful, others cautiously hopeful. "Understand?" someone shouted from the back. "You can't understand without facing the truth." Are you ready to see it? The challenge rang clear in the night air. Marcus felt a wave of unity swell among the gathering. They were all tired of just words. They needed action, and they needed it now. Yes, Marcus shouted, feeling the adrenaline surge. We need to take this beyond talk. We need to face the hard truths together. Alex struggled to get up, brushing the dirt off his clothes. I want to share my story, he announced, voice still ringing with authority. We've been silent for too long. But if we're going to build a bridge, we have to tear down the walls first. Every eye turned to him, for Alex spoke with a clarity that resonated deep down, a reminder that their struggles were shared. I've faced judgment for who I am. I felt fear every time I saw blue lights in my rearview mirror. But I'm here because I believe change is possible. And just like that, the crowd began to rally behind him. One by one, stories unfolded, words pouring out like rain after a drought. An elder spoke of the days when unity meant standing together against oppression. A young mother recounted experiences of navigating life with her children in an unjust world. Each story became a thread, weaving them closer, binding them together in solidarity. The officer listened intently, his expression shifting as recognition dawned. "I didn't know," he murmured, looking visibly shaken. David took a step forward, a reassuring presence. "You're learning right now, and that essay step in the right direction," he offered. "But we need more than just words. We need accountability." "I promise," the officer said, determination rooting his voice. "I will commit to change. I'll advocate for community forums, and I will ride with you to understand your reality." The atmosphere buzzed, filled with cautious excitement. Change was on the tip of everyone's tongue, an ember ready to ignite into a flame. Marcus stepped closer to Zoe, who beamed at the unfolding transformation. "Do you see that? Change is happening," he whispered, feeling the warmth of hope blanket them. "Yes, he is going to try," Zoe exclaimed, her eyes shining with anticipation. The crowd cheered, unleashing years of frustration and grief into a cathartic wave of noise. "We can make this happen. We have to keep pushing." The officer nodded, taking a step forward. "And I'll ask all the officers to help us bridge this gap. We need to learn from each other. This will not just be a community meeting. It will be our way of rebuilding trust." As they all rallied together, it felt extraordinary. There was a sense of energy that whirled in the air like a dance of freedom. They were crafting something meaningful, a movement, not just for themselves, but for future generations. And suddenly, under the blanket of the night sky, it felt right. They had chosen to confront their fears, not just as individuals, but as a unified community ready to take a stand against misunderstanding and violence. When the crowd began to disperse, they made commitments, not just words, but actions. They rose with a sense of purpose. Marcus watched Zoe bounce off, sharing excitement with neighbors. He felt a tear fall as he realized at that moment they had chosen compassion over chaos. In the end, change began not with a single slap, but with a resurrection of hope woven through the pain. It was a start, delicate yet powerful, and outlined by the possibility of unity that dared to challenge the status quo, to rise from the ashes of despair and become better. Together, with lighter hearts, they turned to look toward the future. Now was the time to forge ahead. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for these inspiring stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find hope in these struggles. Comment your reactions and feelings about this uplifting ending. And don't wait, not even one more second to share. Send this video to at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation today.